Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical, and thank you for stopping by. Let me start with some macro thoughts and Nassim Nicholas Taleb. The market is like a large movie theatre with a small door, and the best way to detect a sucker is to see if his focus is on the size of the theatre rather than that of the door. That's very powerful. Of course, I wrote about Boris Johnson and the pound on the 5th of August under the title, What's Your Road, Man? And the latest BREXIT poll data shows that the Conservatives are projected to win 333 seats with an effective and outright majority of 22 without the DUP or Brexit party support. And that's from the market here. And I think that's why Boris is determined to bring this to a conclusion on the 31st of October, any which way he can, because he wants to fight an election and win it, and he can. And that's why the others are desperately trying to avoid and block that very outcome. Nevertheless, if he does take it to an election, the nature of the confluence of circumstances will be like it was in 1992, when I watched the pound fall like a stone, and I could not help wondering if this sterling moment is precisely like it was in 1992, a no-brainer. So I think you'll get a big fall in sterling, knee-jerk fall below 120, and then you'll get the turnaround happen, and I think we'll be considerably higher than 120 within 12 months. So it is, however, like catching a falling knife. This is a sterling chart from FX Pip Titan. We're currently at 122.05 and just holding above this 122 level, but I expect that to give way. The NBA will not put itself in a position of regulating what players, employees, and team owners say or will not say on these issues. We simply could not operate that way. This is Adam Silver's statement on the NBA in China. And I think it is precisely correct, this statement, because anything else is craven. And from a brand perspective, anything less now will cause immediate blowback and damage, and NBA's Adam Silver is alerting us to that fact. And in fact, I would set up a short index for brands that capitulate in this regard, because I think what they might hang on to in China, they're going to lose elsewhere. And I think that's well worth thinking about. Home thoughts. It was 52 years ago yesterday that Che Guevara was captured by army forces in Bolivia, tweeted Cuba's solidarity. Of course, Che had an outsized influence here on the continent. 9 days after his capture, speaking to a rally of more than 1 million people in Havana, Fidel Castro declared the 8th of October the day of the heroic guerrilla. He said many things. If you tremble with indignation at every injustice, then you are a comrade of mine. We cannot be sure of having something to live for unless we're willing to die for it. Let the world change you, and you can change the world. I am not a liberator. Liberators do not exist. The people liberate themselves. I went back to the Joker, which I'm looking forward to seeing this weekend. My mother always tells me to smile and put on a happy face. She told me I had a purpose to bring laughter and joy to the world. This video zooms in from a view of the Milky Way to the planetary nebula ESO 57724. That's from Rainmaker 1973, and it's rather grand. I'm going to touch on The Bonfire of Vanities, which was written by Tom Wolfe. And I saw this quote: vulgar, but not as vulgar as Louis Vuitton, thought Sherman. And again, I've been really mulling Ecclesiastes. I must say, vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. I found that extremely powerful. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new, it has been already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. Political Reflections of Mr. Kevin Rudd, who I met here in Nairobi, says China and the US have perhaps their last chance to end the trade war. Otherwise, get ready for global economic turmoil, he writes in the South China Morning Post. Now that the celebrations marking the 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China are over, it is time to direct attention back to the Sino-American trade war. That conflict may well be about to enter its end game. I think that's a mistake. I don't think it is. Indeed, the next round of negotiations could be the last real chance to find a way through the trade, technology, and wider economic imbroglio that has been engulfing both countries. Now, I've written about this several times. The latest article I wrote was about China turning 70, and I speculated that Xi's high watermark is behind him. And I said then that shorting the renminbi, in my opinion, is a bit of a no-brainer. 7.15 trading. 26th of August, I said, what is also clear is that China has been very precise in taking aim at the farm and oil economy in particular, which is designed to strike at Trump's soft underbelly. Trump is throwing money at the farmers and now proposing more ethanol as well. In that same article, I quoted, speaking about Xi, I am the Alpha and the Omega, says the Lord God, who is and who was and who is to come, the Almighty. 13th of August, I was talking about the feedback loop phenomenon. Late last year, the view was this is all on Xi's shoulders, said Trey Macabre, co-founder of Beijing-based research firm Trivium China. Xi has personally said that he would handle relations with the United States, and at this point he has failed. Those relations are spiraling out of control. And I was then talking about the renminbi, which is really the safety valve, and it was the method through which Xi was responding to this tariff pressure. And actually it was a message delivered with some finesse and subtlety, and whose import cannot be ignored, and I expect them to weaken that considerably if the pressure builds, which I also expect. And therefore the most important currency to watch right now is the renminbi. This is a renminbi chart from the market ear. My target is over 750. 27th of May, I was saying the China-US war will turn ballistic. The point being, in the trade war, Trump is no longer the decider. In the US, there is clearly a consensus baseline for a full-on toe-to-toe slugfest, as it were. In China, however, there is only one decider, who was pronounced as much by Xinhua in a historical announcement in March 2018. Xi reckons he can direct a successful society-wide struggle in the trade dispute, notwithstanding all the hyperbole and very partisan commentary. The following are the plain truths. The markets are still pricing in a benign, but much less benign than a month ago outcome. And I said then we need to consider what a non-benign or even maximum non-benign outcome looks like. 10th of December, when they had the truce dinner with the steaks and the wine, and then the arrest of the Huawei CFO, this is sending a signal there is a new game, said Dennis Wilder, a former CIA China analyst. 15th of October last year, war is coming. I recall President Obama describing the presidency thus. He said it was like being a train driver. The rails are laid and the directions set, and the president can speed up or slow down, but nothing more. In December 2013, I wrote a piece headlined "The Pivot to Asia Bears Its Fangs," in which article I said, I see the pivot to Asia as the encirclement of China, then the shrinking of its operating theatre, and then lighting the tinderbox that is the periphery, and Xinjiang might well morph into China's Afghanistan. China, of course, has been stuffing the residents of Xinjiang with pork, locking them up in internment camps and brainwashing them in order to prevent that outcome. The pivot to Asia was the signature name for President Obama's pivot, which entailed a repositioning of US assets into Asia, and which China saw as a US attempt to contain it and bottle it up. If one is to criticize Obama, one would criticize him for being incredibly supine in the teeth of China's salami slicing, a phrase used by Ronak Gopaldas. This geopolitical contest will likely escalate dangerously. Powerful forces on both sides are driving the world's two strongest economies towards full-fledged confrontation. That writer was Douglas Dillon, professor of government at the Harvard Kennedy School and author of Destined for War in the FT. And around that time we had an incident with the USS Decatur where a Chinese warship came within 45 yards of the Decatur, and I said surely that event is a precursor. 9th of July, which was my first piece about this whole thing, Tariff Wars, Who Blinks First, I spoke about James Dean, who was an iconic American actor, who tapped into the universal yearning and angst of nearly every adolescent human being with a raw connection that has surely not been surpassed since. In one of his most consequential films, Rebel Without a Cause, two players, Reed teenage boys, decide to settle a dispute, Reed teenage girl, by way of near-death experiences. Each speeds an automobile towards a cliff. A simple rule governs the challenge. The first to jump out of his automobile is the chicken, and by universally accepted social convention concedes the object in dispute. The second to jump is victorious, and depending on the context becomes gang leader, prom king, etc. Buzz, the leader of a local gang, agrees to a chickie run. Both race stolen cars towards the edge of a cliff. The first to eject out of his car is branded a chickie. Seconds into the race, Buzz discovers that his jacket is stuck on the door handle, making jumping out of the car somewhat difficult. Jimmy jumps out an instant before the cars reach the edge of the cliff. Buzz, still unable to free his jacket from the door handle, fails to escape. While he won't be branded a chickie, he suffers a worse fate. So those are my thoughts. I don't think we're going to get any quick resolution here at all. Before mass leaders seize the power to fit reality to their lies, their propaganda is marked by its extreme contempt for facts. For in their opinion, fact depends entirely on the power of man who can fabricate it, said Hannah Arendt, which I thought was powerful. And thank you, the origins of totalitarianism. Essentially, US foreign policy, in my view, is now being run by a single individual whose knowledge about the area where he's making life and death decisions is zero, and therefore the situation is quite incredible. Donald Trump is not a commander-in-chief. He makes impulsive decisions with no knowledge or deliberation. He sends military personnel into harm's way with no backing. He blusters and then leaves our allies exposed when adversaries call his bluff or he confronts a hard phone call. That's Brett McGurk. Former National Security Advisor Ambassador Rice gets interviewed on the Colbert Late Show and says what she thinks about Trump's decision to abandon the Kurds in northern Syria, and I, for one, agree with her. Trump falsely claimed he consulted with everybody, including Joint Chiefs. The Pentagon, according to Raw Story, was blindsided. The Kurds have done 95% of the fighting to destroy ISIS, which is an Erdogan asset. To pull the rug from them at this point is widely viewed throughout the Middle East and our allies in the world as shameful. Retired Army General Barry McCaffrey. That's on an interview on MSNBC regarding US troops leaving Syria. A recently departed senior Pentagon official considered the pullout a blatant betrayal of the US Kurdish partners that gives carte blanche to Erdogan for a widely forecast bloodletting. Nobody who fought ISIS in Syria in one vicious battle after another has forgotten that the huge Turkish army stood by and did nothing against the Islamic State as its killers carried out genocidal campaigns against Yazidis and Shiites while abducting, torturing, ransoming or beheading Americans, Europeans and Japanese, among others. Through it all, NATO ally Turkey was not interested in intervention, far from it. It's going to be a massacre, that's clear, ex-official told the Daily Beast. It's fundamentally wrong. They destroyed the caliphate. Buckle up, abrupt Syria policy shift is sign of Trump unchained. Over the span of just a few hours, Trump upended his own policy on Syria with a chaotic series of pronouncements, blindsiding foreign allies, catching Republican supporters off guard, and sending aid scrambling to control the damage. It really is quite extraordinary. In this photograph, Trump's glass of Diet Coke is seen with the presidential seal on it. Sits on his desk in front of his phones during an interview with Reuters. In the article, Reuters is saying phone calls with Trump is a more risky venture than a diplomatic boon. Arranging a phone call with the President of the United States used to be seen as a diplomatic win, but increasingly it comes with serious risks, from transcript leaks to domestic political blowback, and advisors are growing wary. Any world leader who has spoken to Trump, the idea that verbatim transcripts could be released is a worrying prospect and likely to alter how such calls, the lifeblood of international diplomacy, play out in the future. My advice to Macron on Twitter, at least, was not to react because Trump will double down and you will lose. Former Secretary of State Colin Powell called on the Republican Party to get a grip and criticized American foreign policy as a shambles, which it is. C.S. Dickey, Turkey also has a responsibility in the rise of ISIS, having allowed over 40,000 foreign fighters to cross over its border into Syria, and many unabashedly on their way to join Islamic State. Many prisoners tell us of Turkish complicity with their journey into IS land. Iraq seems headed for instability as one aspect of the multi-dimensional US war on Iran. That's E.J. Malrai. Robert Fisk, in other words, unless the Prime Minister can bring the crisis under control in the next couple of days, his own administration in Iraq may begin to implode. According to transcripts, Sheldon Adelson told investigators that Serra would tell my wife that if Iran were to attack Israel, it would be on your head because we did not advertise favourable photos of her. This is incredible. Times of Israel. She's absolutely crazy. She's obsessed with the photos and how she looks. She told us, I'm the First Lady, I'm a psychologist and teach children about psychology. She screamed that I was sucking her blood. It was awful. She totally lost it. I hugged her and said to her, Sarah, it'll be okay, Adelson recalled. According to the transcripts, you can't make it up. Boris Johnson, in that speech which I spoke about yesterday, how do you plead with an algorithm? And I've gone back to that 24th September speech at UNGA, which I thought was really quite tremendous. Your mattress will monitor your nightmares, your fridge will beep for more cheese. Data is the crude oil of the modern economy. Can these algorithms be trusted with our lives and hopes? Certainly not. The same programs, platforms could also be designed for real-time censorship of every conversation with offending words automatically deleted. Indeed, in some countries, this happens today. Digital authoritarianism is not, alas, the stuff of dystopian fantasy, but of an emerging reality. In a tube of fennel, as you may remember, that Zeus punished him by chaining him to a Tartarian crag while his liver was pecked out by an eagle. And every time his liver regrew, the eagle came back and pecked it again. And my article was talking about a little bit about this. X's model is one of technocratic authoritarianism, and a recent addition to his bookshelf included the master algorithm, and that he's building an algorithmic society. And the folks in Hong Kong, whom Xi is seeking to unmask so he can exercise algorithmic control over them, are in open rebellion. Joshua Wong spoke of Hong Kong as das neue Berlin. And I was saying, Xi sees Hong Kong and Taiwan like a virus, and he's looking to impose a quarantine, just like he has imposed on Xinjiang. And that the Chinese dream has become a nightmare, the boundaries of the Han Empire. The world in the 21st century exhibits viral, wildfire, and exponential characteristics, and feedback loops which only become obvious in hindsight. I would venture that Xi's high watermark is behind him. Shorting the renminbi is a bit of a no-brainer. The pork apocalypse speaks to a very fragile food situation. The periphery requires a lot more finesse than more blunt force. But then I was also saying he can rely on a US president whose dereliction of his international duty is now in plain sight, and which led Wang Yi, the foreign minister, to say China will not interfere in the internal affairs of the US, and we trust that the American people will be able to sort out their own problems. Of course, the intention of that comment is to say you will not interfere in ours either. Trump is the bad guy's patsy, Kim, Putin, Erdogan, the weakest and most ignorant POTUS in history, Simon Schama. Even so, the unconscionable betrayal of the Kurds is a breathtaking capitulation. I now take you back, still staying with that vanity theme from Ecclesiastes, FOCAC 2018 last year, when I said then a substantive linguistic recasting of China-Africa by Xi, and he used the phrase the end of vanity, and I think a lot of people miss that. As I said, the folks in Hong Kong whom Xi is seeking to unmask so he can exercise algorithmic control over them are in open rebellion. But look at this from Demos Isto. A group of masked persons appeared in a closed subway station with a flashlight widely used by Hong Kong police terrorists. Let's move on to the currency markets. The euro is at 109.68, so it's firming up a little bit. Dollar index 99.10. Japanese yen 107.15. Swiss franc 0.9943. The pound 122.11. The Australian dollar 0.6737. India rupee 71.2275. South Korean won 1198.82, the Rial 408.28, Egyptian pound 16.2887, and the Rand 15.2777. Dollar index, I think we're still grinding higher, going to 100, but we'll probably have another rate cut this month. Euro dollar, as we said, 109.69. We're doing a lot of work here just below 110. Bond trading bots on verge of becoming masters of the universe. They were the golden crumbs, those bits of money that fall off as bonds get traded around the world. Those crumbs were enough to make bond traders the masters of the universe in Tom Wolfe's 1987 novel, The Bonfire of the Vanities, but those days are long gone. Alliance Bernstein Holding LP has introduced a robot to execute corporate bond trades directly with bots at dealer counterparties. First time that bots have traded with other bots in corporate bonds. The master is telling the dog to fetch and bring the stick back. Citi and Morgan Stanley both expect their trading algorithms to be able to directly handle requests to trade and execute without human command, depending on the nature of the transaction. Just imagine that a bond is a slice of cake and you didn't bake the cake, but every time you hand somebody a slice of the cake, a tiny little bit comes off like a little crumb, and you can keep that, Wolfe wrote in his novel. WeWork 2025 bonds hit a fresh low. It could run out of money in Q2 2020 at its current burn rate, according to an analysis by Sanford S. Bernstein. That is just an incredible story. Gold, this is a gold mine of Serra, Pelada, the state of Para, Brazil, 1986. The photographs are by Sebastião Salgado. They're truly amazing. It was astonishing, an epic poem in photographic form. It was my first year working at Magnum, and I remember thinking, imagine if I could get even one story as good as this. Time and again after the publication of Serra Pelada, I heard the same words and phrases to describe it. Biblical, Cecil B. DeMille cinematic, or what the building of the pyramids must have looked like. Salgado's rendition of the scale of the landscape was something that maybe we had experienced in Ansel Adams' large format photographs of Yosemite National Park, but here the monumental was delivered via a journalist's 35mm handheld camera. It really is quite extraordinary. Gold, let's have a look at where that is, 1508.75, doing a bit of work around the 1500 level. Crude oil, $52.55. Everyone's very bearish based on the slowing economy and on the demand side. But I think it's going to take very little on the supply side. You've got Iraq in open rebellion. You've got Turkey going into Syria. You've got a situation where the Houthis are somewhere lurking in the background behind the curtain. So I think at any moment we could get a huge spike in the price again. So I remain bullish. Africa, very strong Indian Ocean dipole event happening right now, could hit East Africa with major floods in coming months. That's from PJ Platts. And I wrote about this before, an obscure climate phenomenon called the Indian Ocean dipole, an oscillation of sea surface temperatures in the Indian Ocean. For those who are weather enthusiasts, this was when we had drought conditions in East Africa, is being caused by an obscure climate phenomenon called the Indian Ocean dipole, an oscillation of sea surface temperatures in the Indian Ocean. It wasn't until the 1990s that Japanese scientists discovered the Indian Ocean dipole, a warm pool of water that migrates between western and eastern poles and affects atmospheric temperatures and rainfall. The phenomenon occurs in cycles of positive warmer, negative cooler sea temperatures, but it has become more extreme in recent years due to climate change. A negative Indian Ocean dipole results in less rainfall over East Africa, and obviously the opposite seems to be what's happening right now. And then I went back to petrichor, which is the earthy scent produced when rain falls on dry soil, and I was talking about how I'd parked myself on the veranda at the Mombasa Club in search for the sea breeze, and later I would learn that I was in fact sniffing the sea breeze for petrichor, which is the earthy scent produced when rain falls on dry soil. The word is constructed from the Greek petra, meaning stone, and ichor, the fluid that flows in the veins of the gods in Greek mythology. Mozambican police have confirmed that 4 of the 5 killers of an election observer, Anastacio Matavili, are police officers. One of them is a member of special forces. Bosses have been suspended. This is serious and chilling escalation of election violence. Latest data on anti-foreign attacks in South Africa from January to September this year: 68 incidents, 18 dead, 43 assaults, 1,449 people forced to flee their homes, and at least 147 shops looted. That data is from Zeno Watch. New sex position called the Ramaphosa get on top and do nothing. That's from Daniel Marvin. South Africa is headed for a junk downgrade. That's Charlie Robertson, who I interviewed a few weeks ago, and he's correctly predicted 8 out of 9 sovereign rating decisions, and he's saying the macro numbers are not supportive of South Africa keeping investment grade. Poor growth, tough public finances, subdued commodity outlook, tension on the streets, anti-Nigerian riots, questions about the president's ability to push through his agenda. All these are worrisome. South African all shares up 3.41% year to date. I was speaking in my China articles about the feedback loop phenomenon, and I said the purest proxy for the China, Asia, EM and frontier markets feedback loop phenomenon is the South African rand. And therefore I'm very bearish on the rand, and I think you buy puts and that we're going to break 1550. We're currently at 15.2754. Egyptian pound at 16.2884. EGX30 up 10.07% year to date. Nigerian all share minus 14.7% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange down 12.41% year to date. Jumia Group insiders get first chance to cut their losses. Early investors in Jumia Technologies, including MTN, Goldman Sachs, face a stark choice: cash out or stick with the e-commerce group after a troubled 6 months. MTN led investors backing the Berlin-based company ahead of an IPO in New York in April. Rocket Internet, Pernod Ricard, Goldman, MasterCard also bought stakes. All are likely to have been prevented from selling stock for 180 days, according to a lock-in clause that expires on Wednesday. Investors initially jumped at the chance to back the so-called Amazon of Africa, but then there was a damaging short sellers report by Citron Research. Turned sentiment. The shares are down 50% from its listing price and about 90% from the high. Investors are carrying massive losses. I don't see many of them heading for the door. We expect the company to deplete its cash balance in about 2 to 3 years. Chinese orders for Kenyan goods jumped 74.13% in the first 6 months of the year, but from a very, very low base. Seems to be all about soft commodities, coffee, specialty tea, cut flowers and avocados. Kenya shilling at 103.85. Nairobi all shares up 4.42% year to date, and NSE20 is down 14.16% year to date. Thank you for stopping by. I believe you've got a holiday tomorrow. Thank you.